All right. Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. We are going to get started. Everybody is running to and fro. We are going to have to, I think most of us have 2 and 3 committee meetings at the same time right now. So we're going to try to dig on in very quickly. We're waiting on Representative Jones to get some information ready for us. We're going to go ahead and take up real quick Representative Howard's House Resolution 403. Representative Howard? Yes, sir, that's fine. Is that good for you, Wayne? Okay. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Okay, to start.
Yes, thank you, Representative.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here for an urging, to ask for your support on an urging resolution where we are asking the convenience store operators across the state to provide access to disabled customers desiring to refuel their cars. And what led me to this, and you don't know some of the things that disabled folk go through until you, and I wish disabledness on no one, but since I'm in this position, I've noticed some things, and this is one. Simple things like refueling your car. You don't have the ability to get out of the car. In my case, my ramp is on the same side as my gas pump, and if I pull up to the pump, then my ramp can't come out. So I have to have someone with me every time I go to pump my gas. So if no one is with me, then I can't pump gas unless I get some assistance. And so what we're asking is the convenience stores to, the larger ones that have 2 or more employees on duty, to send someone out, put signage up that would allow us to call into the station with a phone number and ask for assistance to come out and pump our gas. And that's the gist of the bill. We've spoken to Ms. Angela Hollins, who's with us here today, who represents the convenience stores for the state of Georgia. And she and I came up with this plan to do an urging resolution first to give them a chance to comply. And next year, if for any reason they don't comply, by next year we'll turn this into a bill. And so we've agreed that that's the best approach, and ask for your favorable consideration on this bill.
Okay, Representative, any questions? We have number 22, Representative McLeod. Got it? Should be on. Okay. Has that got it?
I don't know. Oh, yeah.
There you go.
I just want to ask, seeing the resolutions, just the resolution, how, and I know you say next year, but how you expecting it to actually help in this situation, just the resolution?
You're making them, it's sort of like giving a warning ticket, I guess you can say. And Ms. Angela Hollins, she has access to communicating with all of these convenience stores. So she'll be making them aware of this.
In writing?
In writing, and however they communicate. And like I say, by the next session, hopefully they will comply on their own. And if for any reason we have any problems, then we'll consider that the next step.
Thank you.
Okay. Representative Bazemore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to say to my colleague, thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. And you are so right. When you are not the individual but become the individual, then you understand that there's a need to change some things. So I thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Scott.
At the appropriate time, I would just like to make a do-pass motion.
Thank you, Representative. Do we have any other questions from the committee? Any other questions? Okay, if not, Representative, I do have a question. I wondered if Ms. Holland could maybe join you. I was going to ask Ms. Holland a question as well. Since y'all, it sounds like y'all have collaborated on this.
Absolutely.
And so the first thing I was going to ask was, help me to understand, you mentioned legislation, perhaps, after the resolution.
Yes.
Have other states done this? And can you give us some examples of what kind of legislation has been passed in other states? And I want to know from Ms. Holland if, in fact, you're supportive of this measure. Just wanted to make sure that's the case. So could y'all speak to that?
Thank you, Chairman, for your question. I'm Angela Holland. I'm with the Georgia Association of Convenience Stores, and we represent around 1,500 stores and that's throughout the state. And so ADA compliance already calls for a call button to be on the gas pump. However, just like the representative was saying, when he pulls up, there's no way for him to get in touch with somebody in the store. And so part of the ADA regulations simply require that a handicap or a disabled individual pull up and blow their horn. And so that's not what we want in our parking lots is folks sitting out there blowing the horn. So, and there's about, I think there was, what did it say, 14 or 15% of the adults in Georgia have serious difficulty walking or climbing stairs. And so we felt like I had reached out to a couple of my members, one of which already has a phone number. And then I had two more who, when I was talking with them, sent me pictures of the ADA signage that they're putting on their pumps with each location's phone number. And so we've gone through the process of developing a ADA decal that'll be available to our members.
Okay, very good. Representative Bazemore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, again. Can we also make sure that there's not a cost associated with this to the disabled? Because I can see down the road that somebody might want to charge our disabled individuals.
Yes, ma'am, that's already part of the ADA regulations. They cannot increase the fees for a, what does it say in there? If it's self-serve, the self-serve fee is available. They can't change the fee.
Same price, they must offer the service at no extra charge per gallon or no, federal law requires that. Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any more questions of the committee? Okay, there being none, we will entertain a motion.
That we do pass.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay. Motion passes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
And thank you, Ms. Holland.
Thank you.
Okay. Representative Jones? Representative, I just want to begin by saying that I have read your bill, and having been involved with healthcare for my entire career of 30 years, I was fascinated by it. And I mean that sincerely. This is a different way of thinking. And and it's also very complicated. And so I appreciate you being here. And so everyone, we're looking at House Bill 542. And can you confirm the LC number to make sure we got the right one, Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The LC number, Lima Charlie 337817.
Okay. That is correct. Okay, Representative Jones.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman Petrie and the committee. This might be, at least for me, 2 years in the legislature, now going into my third or starting my third. This might be the first time I've heard it in my short time here, which is I don't have all the answers. But I think I have a really good framework to to be able to address what I believe is a socioeconomic issue that needs our attention in really creative ways. So for those of you who don't know, we've been struggling with and how it is that we're going to handle CON, but we're also equally struggling with how we're going to handle indigent and charitable care. There's been all kinds of different machinations around how do we require it, who should be required, how should the money flow, you know, who's going to get the money, etc. So as I was in those committee meetings, I'm on that committee, one of the things that came back to me was I had done a tremendous amount of work in cap and trade in the 2000s. That was primarily around the carbon market, but also a tad bit in the SOX and NOx market, which is basically the market that addresses acid rain. For those of you in my age bracket, acid rain was something that we had in the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic states, basically late 60s, 70s, and then into the 80s. And instead of, in that market and also in the carbon market, instead of there being mandates put down by the government, the idea was, let's trust the stakeholders. Let's trust the ones that, frankly, where we need them to get smarter to be able to address this socioeconomic issue, which in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, that was acid rain. And then in the carbon market, of course, it's basically something that about 197 countries ratified Kyoto, the United States, of course, being one that did not. So as I was thinking about the idea, I kept saying to myself, how could we make it where the actors are going to be the ones that figure out a way to get to a goal that we set? So basically, I took the corollary of cap and trade and came up with floor and trade. So instead of in cap and trade, and if you can direct yourself, oh, wrong monitor, direct yourself to the monitor. In cap and trade, the idea is the first year, and again, I just did this over 4 years, typically schemes like this take 20, 30 years. But the idea is the first year is basically business as usual. And let's just say right now, that's 100 units of X. The idea is each successive year, or maybe over 2 or 3 year periods, we lower the cap. Inside of cap and trade, let's go back up. Say there's 10 companies that are emitting X. Let's assume they're all emitting equally, so they all get to emit 10 units of X. Now we say to them the next year, we need to drop down to 95. So clearly we're going to drop them down from 10 to say 9.5 for easy math. Imagine you're a good actor, you've gotten innovative, you have figured out a way to get below 9.5, say you've gotten down to 8.5. But one of your colleagues still sits at say 10.5. And again guys, I'm just using easy math here. So you go to your colleague, if you're the one at 10.5, you haven't quite figured out how to get down, and you go to that colleague and say, hey, CEO of fill in the blank company, how much to buy that 1 unit? How much can I buy? Because you're 1 unit below, I want to buy that from you for $1,000. Now each of us will be on average at 9.5. Everyone follow that? So the whole idea is, instead of us, also known as the government, telling you how to do it, the idea is no different than a football game, an American football game. We're just saying get to the end zone. Now how you get there, you can run, you can pass, you can do a combination thereof. But we're not going to tell you how to get there, but we are going to give you credit for it. It's the same thing here, guys. So what the thought is could we use the same thought process, but in this case, note the monitors, it's floor and trade. The idea would be, and again guys, just round numbers, could we start at a floor of say 10%? Let's use Forsyth County where I'm at. We'll struggle to get to 10% complete disclosure, and I'm sure you're not surprised by that. Grady will be at 10% by January 3rd of each year. Okay, I say that tongue in cheek. But the fact of the matter is there are certain places that will be over 10 and certain places that will be under 10. Immediately, there's a conversation that starts to be had. Those of us maybe in Forsyth County who are below, we start looking out to those places that we know that will likely be over. What we start to see is more and more innovation. Those of us below the cap, we start thinking of ways to start to get, pardon me, not the cap, the floor. Those of us below the floor, we're thinking ways to get to the floor. Now, in the beginning, it may be, excuse me, Representative Fry, I'm going to use you as an example. I got to go to Representative Fry because out in Athens, they're over, and I'm trying to basically see if I can cut a deal with Representative Fry. But ultimately, I should have a team that's figuring out how to make me more effective in reaching the floor without me having to go to Representative Fry to purchase that. Another way I could be solving it, and again, these are just ideas, guys. Another way I could solve it is, how can I create maybe remote locations? How can I maybe invest in rural hospitals that are over the cap, and now I have ownership in that and I can start getting credit? The point being is, there's a lot of different ways to solve it, and I frankly believe more in the actors than I believe in us in terms of being able to actually, the machinations of reaching what I think is a laudable goal on behalf of the state of Georgia. So in terms of what we were thinking about, let me first say, the bill you're looking at, it's half-baked. And I say that on behalf of Lead Council, myself, and others. We didn't come here, or I didn't come here today to convince you to go line by line and convince you to pass that bill. What we really want is really a thought process around how do we solve this together? Not R, not D, not I, not L, not A for anarchist, but literally, how do we solve it together? I think there's a lot of smart people, not just sitting up here, but in the General Assembly, other parts of the dome, out here, who are actors within this mechanism, who I think would have some really, really good ideas on how we could possibly be the body that sets the goal and then steps back with certain oversight and lets the actors play. This is the last slide, everyone, so don't worry, I'm not going to go and do PowerPoint, or death by PowerPoint. So, the Indigent Care Trust Fund still exists. Why is that important? That's important because we need to be able to capture the Medicaid match. The 2-for-1 Medicaid match is critical in this instance. The second thing is if you see on top, that's the seller. You see on bottom, that's the buyer. The idea would be for the first 2 years, we will have bilateral contracts. So going back to Representative Fry and me, maybe for the first 2 years, he and I have a bilateral contract, but at the beginning of the 3rd year, and I'm not married to the number of years, everyone, but conceptually speaking, we should have enough data that we can set the market. The last thing we want to do is not set the market properly, because the goal would be is that we have transparency. I think the units should be called ICUs, indigent care units, instead of intensive care. But we can talk about that. I'm not good at marketing. But the point of the matter is could we create not just the bilateral contracts, but the transparency so that we could create, in fact, a market. That market then can be traded. And now, instead of me going to Representative Fry, I can go to Representative Allen, Chairman Peachtree, I can go to Representative Cannon. I did that intentionally. He knows why. Yeah. He knows why from last year. Yeah, it's an inside joke. But anyways, long story short, the fact of the matter is that this would give us an opportunity to be able to, I think, achieve the goal, but trusting the actors who play within that. The last thing I'll say before I open it up, for I hope what our brainstorming questions is this. I'd like to see the trust fund basically as what we used to consider as a federal depository when we were on the gold standard. So when we were on the gold standard, for those of you who aren't bald or gray, that basically meant what sat in the depository was the currency that we had out. And we didn't do what we do today in terms of print money just because we happen to be in the mood. So the idea would be any money that sits in the Care Trust Fund and then is matched, so let's assume for a moment $5 million went from the buyers up to the fund, it gets matched, now it's $15 million. That's the number of, quote, ICUs that would be out for trade. So we would never get over leverage or under leverage. And that's key. Just like when you're buying a stock, you don't actually hand the money to IBM or hand the money to General Electric. You go through, TD Ameritrade, you go through whoever it is that you're using, and they basically do the clearing, and then they get you the stock 3 days later in terms of closing within your portfolio. Same thing here. So for me, I think what this represents for us is truly transformation and a framework that I think if we had enough smart people in a room who were yes and, not no but. There's way too many no buts under that damn dome. Sorry. Everyone's finding a way to say no. Everyone's finding a way to put a crank in the armor. I'm not saying this is perfect, but I am saying this. It's a great framework, and I don't say that just because it's my framework. I think it's a solid framework, but I know I don't know everything about healthcare, and we need people who are smart and who are optimistic, not cynical, getting into a room and helping us solve this. So I'll stop right there, Chairman Peachtree.
Yeah, that's our inside joke there. Representative, I think you did a good job explaining. I appreciate the PowerPoint. I think you're right. As I read through here, it appears what you have is a framework of something that, quite frankly, I've never heard anybody speak to, the whole cap and trade analogy in terms of how we have our indigent care requirements in this world, in the world we're speaking to today, but a free market way that might shift funds from hospitals like yours that do very little indigent care to those hospitals that do a great deal of indigent care. So as I said earlier, I was really interested in it from first reading it. So let's get some of these questions out of the way. I think we have Representative Fry first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. This is great innovation. I would expect no less from you. Not really my seatmate, but whispers in my ear on a constant basis about smart things. Just a couple of questions to consider. I understand this is an absolute 50,000-foot view, but would we want an exchange credit to be worth less than an actual care credit in order to encourage folks to actually try to get into doing the care rather than some of our wealthier organizations just being able to buy their credit?
Okay, so Representative Fry, one of the things that the EU, I thought, did really well when they were putting together the European emissions trading scheme around carbon is for each ton that you were short, it was a fine of 100 units plus the cost of abatement, which is basically the same as the credit. So in my view, Representative Fry, I'd like to see us have some type of, I'll say, formula like that, so it isn't just, to your point, I'm in Forsyth County, and it's like, hold on,
Let me write you a check.
here you go. You know what I mean? What we're really trying to do here is get to this laudable goal, and I think we need to be able to encourage all the actors to get there.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, follow up,
Yes.
if I may. And then would there be, would you see the exchange run by a private equity group or something like that, or would it be the Department of Community Health? Would it be the Health Department?
Representative Fry, my view is and again, I'm not gonna say which
Right.
agency, but I think we would have an agency overseeing it. In my mind, I think of it very much a parallel to the SEC. There's a couple of things that we need to ensure the market has trust. We need rigor and we need transparency. Rigor in the sense of audits. So remember I said I think I was top, no, I was low, you were high. So the audit would basically verify that I was at, say, 8 units, you were at 12 units, now the market believes that as opposed to just being self-reported. That's number one. And then number two, we need to make sure that we have someone overseeing the actual market, no different than the SEC. If suddenly we see a move that you typically wouldn't see in that market, they need to investigate that quickly because there could be some type of fraud or some type of activity. So I would see it that way.
And then one more just question, Representative Jones, just overarching. Do you see this as an opportunity for there to be extra funding towards those locations that happen to have a higher indigent care population where, you know, say your hospital could just give me a bunch of money for my extra indigent care is essentially what you're looking at, and then those funds could be supplemental in that general budget. Is that kind of the gist of it there?
I think that's one of them.
Okay.
I wish I knew healthcare the way I know other industries, that I could give you more examples. Since I'm a deal guy, I also go to the idea of infusing capital as opposed to just going through the credits, but could I infuse capital into, say, and I don't know where Athens sits in terms of indigent care, but into an Athens Medical Center where they are over, I infuse capital, and because I now own 50% or 49%, I'm able to get 49% of those ICUs, and then I'm able to use those as basically fungible currency within the exchange. So I see a lot of different ways that you're going to see money move to basically enhance indigent and charitable care. But again, I don't know enough, and I wish I did.
One last little thing. I mean, sorry, Mr. Chair, this is an awesome idea. I think it's blowing me away here. And then, I guess I would just want to make sure that we had oversight on some of the programs that we get into as far as the government is concerned. We'll farm an oversight out to individuals that will be able to take a little bit of money off the top as the money flows in and out. And I just want to make sure that we pay attention to that and that these hospital dollars stay within that system. That's all I would be concerned about.
I 100% agree. I would expect there's going to be maybe 10 basis points or something just for admin, but other than that, we would have to discuss it, like I said, in a broader
Sure.
group. But other than that, no, you're right. It needs to be one of those things where if you're on, what is it, Charity Navigator, you're 5-star.
Right.
The money's going to the purpose, not to quote salaries.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's see who is next here. Is that Representative Scott? No. Representative Cannon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for bringing the bill. I think it's a very interesting concept you speak of. A few general questions, maybe a specific one or two. So help me understand why we're talking about caring for those who are uninsured as a market. Help me get that philosophically.
One second, Yeah, so Representative Cannon, as I was sitting in this, forgive me for the long, I think it's Special Committee on Access to Quality Health, I feel as if we have two choices. We can either A, do some type of, I'll call it a mandate, where we're effectively telling the actors how to solve what I think is a very laudable goal. On the other hand, I think this framework allows the stakeholders, the actors, to not just contribute to how the framework is going to be put together, but how they're going to solve or reach that goal. We, as I'll say, the government or the oversight, we set the goal, and again, I'm using 10% as an example, but ultimately, we looking at the screen, if you don't mind, Representative Cannon, our questions and our challenge will be, do we go from 10 and then up all the way maybe to 12 or 13 or 14 over a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades? Again, that'll be something that we set, and then we'll let the actors determine, hey, how best to get there.
Okay. So, following the line of this general conversation, as we've been talking about certificate of need over this session or over past sessions, help me understand your level of involvement with that process.
Not much at all, Representative Cannon, other than the fact that I was appointed to that special committee. Then I obviously started to research because that's just in my DNA. But before that, I think many of you know me. If it isn't IT, if it isn't transportation, if it isn't education, I normally don't go into those areas just because I just have a huge passion for those 3 areas. This came about, frankly speaking, like I said, I'm sitting in that special access committee and I'm like, wait a second, there's a way to put a framework together to trust the actors more than frankly us telling them how to get to this laudable goal. And that's really where it came from, my business experience in the 2000s in the EU, Japan, certain parts of Asia, etc.
Okay, so that's helpful. So you obviously get that there is kind of a certificate of need and charity care overhaul that's going on right now. And so the special commission was appointed to further study the issue. So would you be open to this being something more like a study committee then instead of?
Yeah, I don't want to speak for the chairman, but I believe something like that is appropriate here, being able to get your support for a study committee and being able to do this quote off season and then being able to come back in January of 20, hopefully with what I hope is a baked, approach that is much more than just, what is this, 80 lines? My hunch is it'll be 800 lines, but that's okay. I think a lot of smart people will get around, I'll call it the proverbial table, and help us solve this very important goal.
Okay.
We have another committee waiting to get in here. So, Representative, one of the things, and it just was alluded to, so you yourself have, as I mentioned now twice, before. Really novel idea. But you yourself have said there's still, so you've got this idea, but there's a lot of detail that's not in there. And so I do believe that a study committee, that would be a House study committee so that we can get it done and not have to worry about crossover and all this. If we could do a House study committee that would, and if you could drop that, we want this bill to live, we want this idea to advance. But with the lack of further information and with the lack of time here, and we have another bill to hear briefly as well, I think that what we should do, not take a vote today, but let's encourage you strongly to drop a House study committee, and I would hope that we would include the hospitals and yeah, let's go to Representative. Hold on one second here. Go ahead, I got you. I got you.
One of the things that I would just mention to the chairman, if we do a House study committee, all it takes is a resolution. And if we do the resolution, you don't have to worry about Thursday. I think the idea is great. I think if we could just, like I said, keep it open. We've already had the discussion, and then maybe drop a resolution, not necessarily by Thursday. We've got enough stuff to do.
Yeah.
But then to create a study committee to look at it over the summer, I think it's got a great idea, and I applaud your efforts on it.
Okay. All right. That being the case, we're going to not take any further questions. We're going to leave it at that. Representative Jones, we'll expect that you're going to let me get all these on. You're going to drop that resolution? And this bill will continue. I think we need to recognize that we need to get it out there and start really speaking about this and let others join in and learn more. And we'll expect to hear more from you as well. So.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time and a small favor to the entire committee. If you have certain things you'd like to see in the resolution, would you be so kind to my House email account? I'll hold until probably crossover day because we're just all too busy. But if you can get
Right.
to me like Thursday or Friday, and I'll alert lead council that I'll need a resolution next week. Is that fair?
That's great.
Okay.
Thank you, Representative Jones. Okay, and next, again, in light of the fact that we were delayed today, we're really being pushed. We have a committee that is due to have this room right now, actually overdue. We want Representative Douglas, there he is, Representative Douglas we had on the agenda to have a hearing only on House Bill 135. Representative Douglas? Wherever you prefer. Wherever you prefer. Would you like to be at the table, Mitch? Okay. Let's get you right there.
Right.
Okay, that should be on there, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, thank you for having me. I was just want to set a little background for this bill. I know we're pressed for time, but I don't think we need to rush through taking care of our elderly. I have a passion for kids and elderly. Those are two areas. If you want to get me really jacked up, mess with my kids and mess with my elderly people, and you're going to see another man. So this basically is we're working off of a substitute at the top. It should say LC 460106 ERS. We're working off that. And so I bring to this committee this bill because the simple fact is I see so many things that's going on, and I was raised by a grandmother, and I'm very passionate about my elderly. And this bill right here will basically put an electronic monitor device in facilities that you can see and not necessarily touch, but you could communicate with your loved one if you had to put them in a nursing home, elderly care facility. On page 26, there's underlined the facilities that I'm talking about. Home care, assisted living in the community, personal care homes, et cetera, et cetera. But I just wanted to bring this bill to, if I had to put my grandmother in the elderly home, after she raised me, I would want her protected. I don't want to pay somebody to see her get hurt. Or I want to be able to communicate with her during her glory years. It should be her last years, her glory years here on this earth. And I have some pros and cons about the bill. I just want to illustrate to you guys that this is more of a heartfelt bill that I think each of us, if we were in that situation, we want the best care for our loved ones. And in most cases, if we have to put our loved ones in the facilities, majority of the people live out of state that normally have to put their people in these type of homes. And I think, you know, instead of them traveling, spending $300 every 2 weeks to get a plane ticket or every month, however much time they can queue in right away, look at their loved ones, make sure they're smiling, make sure they're okay, or just communicating with them. It's just a passion of love, I think, that we should distribute here in our state. Some pros about the bill. It provides residents and families the option to install a monitoring device. This has a lot of pages, but it's pretty much a simple bill. I guess most of this stuff is for code and all that stuff. Legal counsel is here if you guys have any questions about the legal part of this. But the main gist of this bill is basically installing a camera, okay, on the dime of the residents, okay? No facility is responsible for this, okay? Only the residents and their caregiver, okay, has to pay for this device. It's nothing that has to go on the wall. With today's technology, I think we have moved forward that you can sit this phone up there or that can and monitor your loved one. And so some more pros about this. And no, let me tackle the cons first. These are the things that it does not address. Requires a resident to have a monitoring device, require a resident. We're not requiring that any residents in any home be required to have this. This is basically an asked, and you'll be able to be granted. Each resident has the option. I want to give them an option to have that device in, but they're responsible for all of the background as far as implementation of the device and taking care of that device. The facilities doesn't take care of any of that, okay? No responsibility to any facilities. Number two, requires the residents to share a room with someone who has a monitoring device. This is very key. If you have a roommate in your care home, they have to consent in order for you to even have one. If your loved one wanted you to have one and you have a roommate, they would have to sign a consent form in order for you to have that in the room. Two, it doesn't violate any HIPAA law. We covered that with the consent form. Because the nursing home residents will only have the monitoring device if they choose to have it, and the resident roommate must agree to allow the camera in the room. And number four, allows videos from the monitoring device to be broadcast over the internet for general viewing. These are things that it's not doing, okay? Let me make that clear. And finally, it results in additional costs to the nursing home facilities. All costs will be paid by the nursing home facilities or a resident or the resident's family. Those are the things that it does not do. And let me talk about some things that it does, and we're gonna get on out of here, and I'll take on any questions. It ensures that the roommate of the resident with the camera has consented to the device installation. Helps provide assurance to the resident's family members that the loved one is receiving proper and appropriate care. Because this is the last thing we want. You stick your loved one in the facilities, you hadn't seen them in a month, and you spend $400 or $500 on a plane ticket, you get there, you're like, hey, guys, you're not taking care of my loved one. Look, you hadn't changed the sheets. This is something they can tune in just to check and see and tune out, okay? And allows video evidence that can be exonerated by the nursing facilities staff when inquires injuries or due to an accident or failure of the resident or fault of the resident. So guess what? We tuning in, you got the camera rolling, something happens, and they say it was on the facilities. They said, no, you slipped and fell on your own. We didn't do this. So it takes all the, I guess, the feeling of doubt away from everybody. This is the short and skinny of the bill. It's not, it's a long bill, but it's pretty much just saying the same thing over and over. And it doesn't cost the facilities any money. So at this proper time, I would take any questions from the members.
Okay. Thank you, Representative Douglas. And we're going to take questions for the sponsor right now. Representative McLeod.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm trying to envision all of this, this camera. So it's in the room, what, 24/7s?
Yes, ma'am.
And if you were sharing the room, and it has to be shared with somebody else, they would give consent. So I'm wondering the loved one that's outside the room can basically look at in this room 24/7. I mean, where exactly are the cameras positioned? Are they just in the general area? Are they in bedrooms?
Basically, it's in your room. And normally you have a room, you don't have like a little lobby area where you can go, and then it's basically in your room. It can be set anywhere. It's pretty much like, do you see the doorbell cameras? Mm-hmm. Okay, it's pretty much like Ring, okay? I can tune in and see what's going on with just a ding. Like if somebody comes in the room, my phone dings, okay? It's on, but guess what? I didn't actually view it until somebody walks in the room. You can set up anywhere you want to, but mainly it's when somebody comes in the room, it can ding your phone. You can oversee that, okay? And there's parameters in the bill where you know, of course, if they're changing them or they're taking a shower, the camera's off. The camera's off and stuff like that. But other than that, you can position the camera anywhere you want to in the room.
And that you feel will give confidence to you as the person who's outside, make you feel confident that your loved one's being taken care of and that you can communicate with them.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And also, you know, most of these residents are paying to be there or paying for their lawn care. I think it's very advantageous that they get this done.
Okay. Representative, I'm going to ask, we have several questions. I'm going to ask that the questions be very quick because, again, this is a hearing only. You waive, okay? Because we have regulated industries waiting to get in, and the chairman is looking at me right now. I do want, real quickly, before we leave, though, I want to first, I thought we have our state long-term care ombudsman here. I think it'd be helpful in the interest of this meeting is to make us familiar, as we did with the last bill, of the issue that we can study going forward. I think it's important that we also hear from a long-term care ombudsman who is first and foremost responsible for protecting the rights of our residents in long-term care facilities. So, Ms. McNeil, I know you had signed up. There are others that did as well. We won't have time to hear from everybody, but if we could hear from you, thank you. Wherever Representative Douglas. Yeah, okay.
I don't bite. Come on.
Okay. And again, brevity is appreciated.
Sorry, just some basic concerns. First of all, we need standardized forms. The bill allows each facility to prepare its own forms. That's going to be a nightmare for us as ombudsman. It's going to be a nightmare for healthcare facility regulation folks. When we get complaints, to go in then and look and see, have to, read every form to see whether the form actually does what it's supposed to do in the first place, and then is there a violation of that. So we did this with qualified income trusts, and it makes it easier for the regulators and for us too to know that works. So I think that's something we need to talk about. Secondly, there's a concern about who can consent, and residents in facilities that have guardians. Guardianship doesn't take away every right for a resident, and so and lots of residents have a guardian that if you talk to them, you wouldn't even know that they had a guardian. You know, there are certain things they can't, certain decisions they can't make. So a concern about the language about who can consent, and we should really be sure that we're talking to residents first before we give that right to someone else. We need an absolute prohibition against recording long-term care ombudsman interaction, and the reason I say that is federal law has strict confidentiality requirements for us, and I think some of the other folks that have confidentiality concerns would also say the language needs to be different as it relates to that. There's also a concern in the bill about who can turn it off, who can turn the monitor off, and who can turn it on. So one of the things the bill describes is a healthcare professional can turn it off. But it seems to me that part of what you're trying to get at is monitoring how care is given. And healthcare professional isn't defined. And so we'd want to be really sure who it is that we're talking about who can turn it off. But then the other concern is, so what if we forget? And then how do we go back and delete what should have been not recorded in the first place? But the other issue is, what if we forget to turn it back on? So who's liable, or do people need to be liable? I mean, how do we want to, look at that? And then there's some language about the sharing of the recording by two parties, but it doesn't necessarily relate to the resident. So if you look at the language of the bill, it says, parties can access these recordings, but it's not really clear whether it's a party who is a resident or if it's somebody else completely. And is that what we're intending by all of this? How long do you have to keep the recordings? The bill doesn't say. And so, for some, you might keep it a week or you might keep it a month, but who even monitors that? How do we, there are just some issues that need to be addressed. And then the other really sort of big thing, the original bill provided some funding for those who don't have money to be able to access, but now the bill doesn't do that. The substitute doesn't do that. And so a lot of residents wouldn't be able to do this. So just some concerns that I think we need to address.
Thank you, Ms. Ombudsman, and we have got to go. We're going to have Ms. Sinden very brief. Is that what are you? Oh, you have a constituent. Okay, very brief. And but since you drove to be here, we want to hear from you. Please do. Either way, ma'am, podium or wherever you prefer, wherever you're comfortable. And we're not going to take further questions from the members.
I'm really not comfortable yet, but I will be. The reason I'm here is that my mom's dementia has declined significantly over the last 6 months. So she can't make decisions for herself. And in time, I really had kind of a big presentation and really to talk about this, because we hear about all the horror stories in the news that are going on in long-term care or nursing homes and other facilities. And I even looked up if I could put a webcam in my mom's room, because she made statements to, and these are, a lot of people say, well, she's got dementia, but in the moment when I was changing her and trying to pull her pants up, and she stepped on her cuff, I said, you're on your cuff, lift up your leg, and I have to tap her leg to which one it is. And she says, oh, they get mad at me when they dress me. So what do I do with that? I made this comment to the facility administrator, and they say, well, we really don't know who it is. I know who it is because I know who dresses her. The other things are, my mom has fallen 8 times since 2016. She had 2 falls just this year, January 1st, and then an unreported fall on February 4th. The unreported fall is basically nobody admits to it, but my mom stated, and when you're with your mom or loved one, and she's afraid to get out of her wheelchair because she says, I'm going to fall. And she won't even get out of her wheelchair to transfer to the toilet. And I had to get the CNAs to help her so she wouldn't feel. And she said, I fell down. I was laying on the floor. I yelled and yelled, and a man and woman came and picked me up and put me in the bed. I have no person to say did this. My mom also has many other issues. One time I was coming, I could read all of them, but you'd be astounded. I came in the facility, I'm walking down the hall, and I see my mom's shoes and pants and hands covered with something. Sorry, I get emotional. And I couldn't figure out what it was. When I got to her room, I realized it was excrement. It was on her toilet, it was on her floor, it was on her bed, and she put rags under her bed where her shoes are to hide the things because she didn't want anybody to see that. This was dried. This was not something that just happened when she came out of her bathroom. She had been to an activity and came back since this all happened. So how can people not see this? And did somebody come in the room and see it and just walk back out? I walked in, sorry, I'm getting lost, but I mean.
Ma'am, we had someone sign, is Jackie Smith, is that your
Yes, I
name? I want to
am.
make sure we record that you testified. And I was just going to, again, in the interest of time, I want to ask you, is your mother in a skilled nurse facility or an assisted living facility?
Yeah, she's in a skilled nursing
She's in a skilled
home.
facility. Have you, as it relates to this bill, have you approached that facility and said, I would like to put a camera in her room, and they denied you that request?
Sir, I can't
is
get
that-
grievances answered.
Okay, but to my question, have you spoken to them about specifically, expressly what this bill speaks to? Have you spoke to them about this issue?
No, I have not,
Okay,
because
that's
I
'cause-
don't think they would entertain it.
Right, but you
I-
haven't asked them pointedly that.
No.
Right, got you. Well, Ms. Smith, we appreciate you being here today. Thank you for coming. And I think that in the interest of time, we've got.
May I make one more comment?
Yes, ma'am.
My mom's care has, her dementia has declined, but her care has not increased. And
Thank you.
I
Thank
am
you.
there 5 hours a day, at least 4 days a week, so she gets the right care. And I pop in just to see that. But these are not, my mom, you know, I want her to have a natural death. I don't want her to fall and not be able to have a surgery. They have it in their care plan that she is to be watched, taken care of. She assisted with getting dressed. I come in and she's in the same clothes she was the day before. Nobody dressed her.
Yes, ma'am.
And one other point before I leave, because this bill is very important to many people. I was to have 2 other family members here from that have loved ones in the nursing home, but because of the short notice, they couldn't make it. I have gone through the CMS incident reports, and I've only got to the end of the Bs. A through B. There's 360 nursing homes in Georgia. And I have found where people have wandered out in the road that are not reported. They're not in the news. In front of a car. Another person, it stated that the CNA lowered to the resident to the ground, lowered. But he had a broken hip after that. So if somebody just opens their eyes and reads these reports, you can see what the care is and what the damage can be to people. There are things happening every day in nursing homes and or all of the facilities. And I just brought these, and I've asked Melissa to give Representative Douglas a copy. This is an email.
Please do that. Let's get
So
your
you-
information, and we'll
yeah.
disseminate it. Can we get that to all the members?
And you can
We
click
will do
on the
that, Ms.
link
Smith.
to all of these incidents.
And having spent my entire career in long-term care, we are all here sympathetic to your issues. Remember, individuals who are frail and disabled suffer in their own homes, in facilities, and everywhere. And so
Right.
we always have to focus on making sure we are as protective as we can be.
Right.
of the most vulnerable. And so we
Can I-
appreciate
can
you
I-
being here today.
one last-
No,
I promise.
I cannot. No, we've got to go. We've got another committee. Unfortunately, up here we have very little time sometimes when our session runs late, and we have another committee. We are overdue, and we are going to move on. Thank you for being here again. Thanks to all of you for being here, and thank you, Representative Douglas. We wanted to make sure that you were able to be heard here. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, all she's saying is it's not working with the ombudsman.
I'm sorry, we are adjourned.